In this episode of Talking Clock, we sit down with Adrian, who goes by Watch Superstars on Instagram, to talk about Franck Muller and independent brands like Bethune and MB&F. If you missed it, do check out the previous two parts I did with him. Before we start, please help by liking the video. The support makes a big difference. Thank you and enjoy. One of the watch brands that we often have as like an inside joke is Franck Muller, I think, between the two of us, and a few other people, I think, especially the Iron Croc that you have. For some reason or other, we'll always joke about it back and forth. But in reality, jokes aside, it's kind of a shame because the reputation of Franck Muller, at least in Singapore, has become like the Bundle brand as probably more.
Not only that, Hublot as well.
Yeah. But Hublot is more hourglass, whereas Franck Muller is like Cortina side. But it's kind of a shame because they actually do release some very cool watches, and I think the Rabbit one, which was released this year, is a great example of that. With I think the strap is fully loomed as well. Just a very cool design. So, in your eyes, I think genuinely in conversations past, you've been telling me about how great Franck Muller is. I'm not sure if you're trolling me or not, but yeah. And you visited the manufacturer this year as well. So yeah, what makes the brand so great in your eyes, or why is it underappreciated in a way?
Okay, so I would say it's underappreciated. I wouldn't say like, wow, it's such a great brand. No, I'm not saying that. Do I like their watches? Yes, I think they're actually extremely creative in the use of materials. You have seen the skeletons, you have seen the tourbillons, the center tourbillons. You see this rabbit watch that I'm wearing. They dare to try out and play with different materials and different dials, right? So for example, this Iron Croc that I have, which you guys always make fun of me having this. It's like an engraving of the croc pattern on the case and on the dial, and it just flows so smoothly.
No,
right?
It's seamless.
Yeah, it's seamless. It's actually very beautiful, right? It's stainless steel, looks like white gold, feels like white gold. What's the biggest joke? When I actually brought this piece to a dealer for service. So I actually brought my Long Island, the Iron Croc, and I actually brought one of my AP Offshore Royal Oak Chrono for service. And so I just sent it to my dealer friend to service it, right? Because these are very old watches. They are more than 10 years old. And so he puts both my Franck Mullers on the beat meter, and they were actually running on time.
And they're quite old.
And they are very old. They're more than 10 years old, and I've never serviced them in my life. Right?
You barely wore
them. And he was quite shocked. Like, whoa, these watches are still running well. You sure you want to service? I said, okay. For the Long Island, but because I just wanted to do some polishing up to the case and stuff like that, so perhaps you just service that. If you think this one is fine, then we'll just leave it because I don't wear it that often, right? And so guess what happened to the AP?
Since it has chronograph, then for sure it's screwed, right?
Yeah. So anyway, it needed a service really badly as well. Sometimes it's very So do you buy watches for telling time accurately, or do you buy watches for the brand, right? That's one big question, and I really give it to Franck Muller. As I mentioned, one issue that I brought up to them was that I think they have way too many models, which I think the ADs themselves cannot comprehend the number of models they actually have in the collection.
Is it a lot of like limited editions, or what is it?
They just have so many different variations of a single model, right? So not just, let's say, a white dial in white gold, rose gold, or titanium, right? It's just not that, but it could be like number 8 in diamonds, or it could be a pave diamond, or it could be like semi diamonds, right? And there's just so many different iterations of it,
yeah,
right? So when I actually brought this matter up to Franck Muller, they brought up a very very interesting point. It's just like, I do know that we have a gazillion models, but our point is to actually provide as much variety and choices to our customers, which also makes sense, right? So there are always two sides to the story. I guess that's their way of marketing, right? Perhaps a lady who would love a particular Franck Muller would like it with diamonds on the numerals, some may not, so I guess it sort of like accommodates to everyone in some way, right?
Yeah.
So sometimes, yes, it could be very hard to strike a balance. Perhaps unless you run the business yourself, then you will understand where they are coming from. They are trying to sell watches to the masses, not to a specific, or a very, very high-end collectors. It's a different target audience altogether.
Yeah, and I guess like the business strategy, well, not everyone has to do a strategy like AP, where I think it's very consciously done in a way to sort of like boost secondary prices, although now we see them falling. But I guess for consumers, it's nice just to have like such abundant choice. But that aside, yeah, I think like you mentioned, design, material-wise, aside from having the variety, the quality is actually also not bad. And you visited the manufacturer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's called Watchland, right? And when I was in Geneva, I mean, everybody, all the watch manufacturers, or even the ADs are saying, Adrian, when you go to Geneva, you have to visit Watchland because it's beautiful, right? And I was gobsmacked when I went there. It was really really awesome. I mean, you actually it was like a little cottage, right? A couple of cottages in a big piece of land, and you can see Lake Geneva on the front of Watchland, and in the background is like the snow-capped mountains. The view from the table of the watchmaker when you look out was amazing, right? So perhaps if I was a watchmaker, if you asked me if I wanted a job at a Rolex or at Patek or at Franck Muller, perhaps I would even choose working at Franck Muller because it was such a pleasant environment. Yeah, and it was really beautiful. Yeah.
And I think like you showed me videos and stuff of it, and it's essentially like a small village. Like everything done in-house, or
everything was done in-house. Of course, they don't manufacture the components themselves. They do buy the components from other suppliers, but everything else was done in-house. From, of course, the mechanism. I saw how they manufactured the case, to the dials, to even they have a section that does their own gem setting, right? So I believe Franck Muller was actually very well known for gem setting long ago because they used to do the gem settings for the Richemont Group.
Oh wow.
Yeah, so that's what I heard, right? Long ago. I'm not sure if they still do it till today, but yeah. So I believe even for Patek, they actually outsource the gem setting, right? I think it's still a company they own, but it's outsourced.
Sure. I mean, most there's always the fallacy that I think some big watch brands do everything themselves, but most of them don't. It just doesn't make economical sense to like manufacture every single component. But
But yes, I saw this with my own eyes and I was like impressed, right? Yeah.
And I think, or in the previous sort of Patek episode, you were talking about the whole relationship and experience thing. And I think, well, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but Franck Muller is also a brand that has, I think the experience for you has been very pleasant so far, right?
Yeah, so of course I have to thank, Sharon, who is Sharon Lim, who is the CEO of Franck Muller for Asia, Nicholas, who is the CEO of Franck Muller. They've always made the effort to keep in touch with me, right? So even for Nicholas himself, he WhatsApped me, so when I was arriving in Geneva, I was sending him a message and he even wanted to send a car to pick me up. He invited me to the gala event, right? He messaged me when he was coming to Singapore, right? Again, I feel very included in the family, right? In the Franck Muller family.
And they're a big brand.
They are
like
a big
production
brand.
and
Yes,
yeah,
it's a big
everything.
production. Yeah, and in a way, you could tell that they appreciate your support for the brand.
That's good.
Right? Yeah, and I do enjoy these kind of relationships.
Yeah, fine. Then I think Franck Muller aside, one thing that I wanted to get your take on, we touched on it before a bit, but independence. So I think within the box, you brought probably the first piece that truly made me appreciate independent watchmaking, and that is it's customized because the dial or the constellation or the stars are customized. But one of my favorite independent pieces, and still to this date, I think an amazing piece, which is the DB28 XP. What is your take on independence nowadays, especially having collected, so much Patek and Rolex and other stuff?
Well, I mean, for independent brands, there are times that you either like it or hate it. I've always wanted to buy an Uhrwerk or an MB&F, but for some reason, I've never found something that actually captured my heart. It always came close, and yet there was something about it that I didn't like. Uhrwerks were always a bit funky.
Yeah, the
right?
most.
Yeah. I do like your LM101, right? I think the Evo is also nice. A little too big for my wrist though. A little bit too messy if you're talking about the perpetual calendar.
And very expensive nowadays, by the way.
Yeah.
The price increase this year was I think 20% across the board. So LM101 steel, when I bought it, was like 70 or so. Now I think a brand new piece from Hourglass is 91, 92.
Yeah,
then,
that would be the
next
question. That would be a white or a rose gold price.
And if you consider 91, 92, what you can get from a Patek or something, you can get a complicated watch, whereas the LM101 is a time only, for example. So nowadays it does beg the question. I'm aware inflation is a thing, and I'm sure that costs are going up, but what is the point to where it's no longer sustainable? I think it's a very precarious point. And I think availability now is also quite an issue, especially in Singapore. Back then when you got your Bethune, it wasn't too hard, right?
No, I waited about 3 months for it to be customized for me.
Yeah.
And it was delivered to me before Christmas on the same year.
Yeah, with your Eye of the Tiger back then.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So now talking about independence, how much is a Gronfell time only going for?
I believe around 40K, if I'm not mistaken, in that range.
Time only in stainless steel, right?
Stainless steel, yes.
How much is a 6119 Calatrava in white gold or rose gold? It's about
Also 40 plus.
Would you buy a Patek or would you buy a Gronfell?
Oh, that's very hard because even if I wanted the Gronfeld, I couldn't buy it because the waiting time is absurd. I think there's something about, I remember seeing
Oh wait, there's one in Far East Plaza right now.
No, but if you wanted to get one new,
I
don't think they're taking orders for any watches now, or maybe new ones, but
you know where I'm coming from, right?
It's
a
tough
Patek
one.
6119 Calatrava, whole lot of history in it for the range of 40 over grand, and a Gronfell time only for 40 over grand.
The thing is, I think it's not just the watch, because when you own a watch, it's also down to the service and everything. If something goes wrong with the Patek, I'm sure it'll be very well taken care of by GMT. But if something goes wrong with the Gronfeld, I'm sure I'll have to ship it back, hope it doesn't hope the shipment doesn't go missing, have them serviced. I'm not sure how long that would take and all of that. So it is that bit of risk that you take with the independent brands as well, I think, generally. So, yeah.
No, but having said that, I mean, you do have very good experience with indie brands like MB&F as well, right?
I think, yes, back then for sure, but I'm not sure how it would be nowadays, especially since demand has picked up so much. And it's not like their teams have expanded drastically. I mean, they physically just can't. So yeah, I'm not sure how it would be nowadays. I thought Romain Gaultier was an interesting example because it seems like they really give an effort to create an experience. Bethune, now that they've been acquired by Watchbox, yeah, I'm not sure how that is anymore. But yeah, independent brands. I don't know. There was a period when our good friend Edward introduced me to the LM101 where I was super excited about the world of independence. It was very new and it's still not super caught on yet. But nowadays, I do have to say I'm a bit getting fatigued as well.
I know, you were like a little boy looking at candy.
And even when I tried on your Bethune for the first time, I was like, wow, this is really something special. Because it's so thin, the lugs are so cool, and everything is just, very nice. It's not a tourbillon, but the sort of exposed balance wheel is so nice as well. Super nice piece. But do you see yourself buying any independents going forwards or anything that you're looking at nowadays?
No, definitely. I'm always for a lookout, for something that really captures my attention. I don't want to be restricted to, just my Rolex Pateks or, even the GLC that I mentioned to you about. I think I would just buy whatever comes my way or whatever really captures my attention, whatever I think that I would wear. I think that's most important. That I think that I would like on a long-term basis and that I will wear, right? So that's what I'm on the lookout for right now.
Interesting. Then I think before we end this part on sort of the miscellaneous brands, the one that I'm also quite curious to get your thoughts on is RM. Of course, back then when they were just starting to enter Singapore, I think it was very easy to get them. I think you were telling me a story of how Richard Mille himself was basically almost like begging people to like buy them or something along those lines, or maybe I heard it from someone else. But back then it was like huge discounts of retail prices.
So he wasn't really begging people, but he came to Singapore for Formula One, and they were just doing a marketing for a new brand for Richard Mille.
Okay.
Right? The brand was like relatively young, so he was like giving 20-25% off the RM5s, and then after that followed by that the RM10s. Of course, being such a young new brand with a relatively short history, they were still trying to get traction.
Yeah, and charging their prices back then.
And the prices they were charging back then were not cheap, right? They are still in the regions of between like 70,000-80,000, to 100 grand kind of range, which could get you, many other Rolexes and Pateks, right? So it was a challenge for them at the start, selling a watch at such a high value. So for me, it was a bit of a jump in the ocean kind of thing. I was like, this is quite cool. Just give it a shot, right? So I bought my very first piece was my RM5. And then after that, I upgraded to I actually sold my RM5 to buy my RM10.
Yep.
Right? And I actually sold my RM10 to buy my RM11. Right? So back in those days, I wasn't that much of a watch collector, and I didn't need to keep my 5 and 10 and 11.
For sure.
Right? So obviously, so I progressed in my RM11 till today. Yes, I do wear my RM11 only for special occasions. I find it a bit thick, right? It's like a hamburger, like a burger between like two buns kind of thing.
Yeah.
It sticks out. Yeah, it sticks out from my sleeve. Which brings to the point of this piece that I just bought recently. Is actually the most basic RM that you can find. It's the RM6701.
I think it might even be like the lowest price out of all of
perhaps
them.
it's the lowest price and the thinnest RM, most wearable, most simple, most understated. I really like this piece. It slips under my sleeve. It doesn't scream RM, and It's super light. It's super comfortable. You know, I feel that I can even wear it to play tennis or
Yeah, probably not.
yeah,
But
or or go out on my weekends. With my kids. Yeah, so really love this watch. It's price aside, it's one of my favorites for now. Right, it's one of the back to the point where I say I would like to buy a watch that I think I would wear and I would truly want and that I'll keep and that I'll love. This for now is something that I feel that way for, right? So, in the mornings before going to work, you would usually open your drawer, open your safe, and then you have a look on what should I wear for today, right? So, but this is something that I would actually look for to wear and decide that I'll wear this for the day, even before even going to my safe. And that's where you really truly like that piece.
if you enjoyed this video, do check out other episodes of the podcast. Thank you for watching.